Welcome to the CXM at MSU Monthly Roundtable. I'm Tom DeWitt. I'm the Director of CXM at MSU. I'm joined by Alistair Meffin, our facilitator of the Monthly Roundtable, who will explain how our program works here and introduce today's speaker. Alistair, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. So welcome, everybody. I'm Alistair Meffin. I am a customer experience executive, been in the industry for about 15 plus years now. And I'm really happy to have everybody here today for our event. So for those of you who haven't joined us, we start off with an introduction. Then we move on to our lightning round, and our presenter will take about 15 minutes, maybe a little longer, to talk about the topic. And then we will turn you all into breakout rooms of 3 to 4 folks, where you will talk about a very specific way to apply the methodology that our presenter will give us. We'll bring you all back after that for about 5 minutes of voting, where you all will decide on which are the best applications for that methodology. And then the presenter and I will bring back and look at those high vote getters and talk about those with the group, where we want you all to participate with questions. So with that, I'm happy to thank you, Tom. I'm happy to have Josh Nard, the head of design, talking about how do we productize CX with pivotal moments. And Josh comes to us with nearly two decades of CX experience across many brands, including Fortune 500s. He's worked to sharpen a holistic approach to CX design, from recent analytics strategy to complex data-driven and operationalized design systems. This includes delivering and managing over a dozen journeys in the last decade. So I'm happy to turn this over to Josh and his presentation.
Thank you so much, Alistair, and thank you, Tom, for having me today. I know we spoke about this initially like a couple months ago. I think it was over the summer when we started talking from time to time about some discussions around pivotal moments. So it's a pleasure to speak with all of you today, and I realize that your time is valuable. So I wanted to just give a bit of an introduction about what this thinking is, but before that I do it, I'll just take a quick beat on my experience, and I'll just share my screen here. Please tell me if you can see my screen when I go full screen. Can you all see it? Okay, perfect. So today we're going to talk a little bit about pivotal moments and really why they even exist, why are we even here today? And then within that, really start to understand what they do and how do we productize them a bit more. The goal is to get you into a workshop and having you collaborate and discuss and just synthesize some of the thinking. And then again, as Alistair mentioned, we'll do some voting and we'll have some larger discussions. And towards the end, I will share maybe like the last 5 minutes, how they start to come together. I'll show an example of how they can be applied. There's so many different ways that you can use this thinking. There's no right or wrong way. It is really just more of a framework for you to jump into that discussion with your teams. So just quickly on that, and I'm keeping myself timed here, Tom. So within that, I got a little timer here. So just a quick discussion on that. Why do we need to have this discussion today? And the reality is it has been becoming an increasing challenge, and both even last year and going into this year as CX practitioners. As you have probably seen, I've seen some head shaking. I see you, Sue, where it is a challenge for us to allocate budget, understand the validity of what we're trying to do. And the reality is, CX is a very nebulous experience to many of our things. It's not like you can actually look at it. It's not like a phone. It's not like a product. It's not like an engineering rack that you can point to and say, look, we bought this or we invested in this. And yet the reality is we all know is that emotions, routines, influencers, and the outcomes, the rewards of those experiences significantly drive both purchase, retention, repurchase, whether it is a service, whether it's a product. We all know that we are human beings. As much as I love Star Trek and I love Spock, we are not Vulcans. We are not highly illogical people. We are also driven with an emotional response. And so when I start to look at this discussion, I really want to sort of point that out and really understand that if there's a way we as CX practitioners can start to formulate a lot of that logic in a way that not only just defines what those moments are and starting to write requirements off of them, but also sharing them across different teams and really flipping the script as to how we think about CX as a larger entity within an organization, it might hopefully help you. And I'm hoping that you get some takeaways on this. I'm going to glance through this and skip through a lot of this, but this is really just like a key example where journeys are being utilized in many different spaces. Some are being utilized very successfully and others are not. And when I started to see these metrics, and I've even seen older metrics around this as well, I kept wondering what is happening here. And starting around 2018, I started to use doing a lot of journey maps. And up until that point, I'd probably done like 7 different journey maps for clients when I was at Accenture. And I started to notice some were like using it, loving it, and putting it on the walls, but they weren't really making them tactical. They weren't really making them actionable. And so I started to think, well, how do we make these more actionable? Like I as much as I love working with clients, I want to see them succeed. I want to see the fruits of the labor, not only mine and my teams, but actually those brands utilizing them. So I started to think about like, how do we craft them and go a level deeper? And so within that, I started to define, okay, there should be some foundations that we should be, some framework that we can start to do, where we can start to think about a moment and then really define what that moment should be, and then allow it to drive greater revenue outcomes. So there's 2 things I'll talk about here. One, which is just really defining customer requirements. What are the key factors? Are there emotions that we need to solve for? Are there successes that we need to drive? Because they ultimately activate brands. They activate brand and revenue outcomes. And that is a metric that we should be starting to consider. Within that space, we also know that this is really hard. So just taking a step back, I recognize that this is complex. Change is hard. Let's just acknowledge that, everyone. Like, we know we're in that space and it's easy to get frustrated or confused or anxious at times. And yet we need to recognize that change is hard, but coordinating change is even harder. So one of the things that I wanted to recognize within that is, instead of us trying to define requirements for this channel and trying to define requirements for that channel, whether it's an app on a phone or whether it's a social media discussion, you may have seen this. I've seen this in my client relationships, and even now, when I was like at United Airlines a few years ago, it can be challenging for a lot of different teams to synchronize on their efforts as well. So again, returning to that idea that if we were to start to create journey maps, and then from those journey maps using real data where possible, and really starting to understand what is a significant moment, whether that's a day, whether that's an hour, or whether that's even maybe a week or 2. I mean, a moment can be very sort of squishy in terms of that time frame, but ultimately that moment is a point where that customer needs to make a decision to move forward, or they're held back because there's barriers in their way to achieve that success. So within that, when you think about this on the longer front, when you take these moments and you've started to define them, you can start to think about what are the quick wins that we can get out and the rapid change that we can deliver, but also be mindful and just with a lot of empathy here that it can be at times challenging. We need to also understand like what are the key barriers that we need to do more slower, more pragmatic change as well. So you can start to pull them apart. Pivotal Moment should have several different requirements across different teams because ultimately they're connected to the customer, right? The customer doesn't care whether you solved it in your social media challenge, but you didn't solve it in your app. They don't care. They just want it to all work, right? And so within that experience, if you start to flip that script, if you start to change that thinking about how do we as an organization start to think of these moments, whether there's just 5 of them in your customer journey or whether there might be 18, or in one case for a client, we identified 21 different pivotal moments. It was for a large auto manufacturer. We looked at the entire journey of an ownership for their vehicles. And so within that relationship, you can start to think about, knowing that there's going to be like pragmatic quick wins, or it's going to be quick wins, and there's going to be pragmatic relationships as well. I've loved this discussion that comes from Lewin, where it talks about change as well. Just quickly, it's about unfreezing these needs. Think of it as an ice cube model. It's to do change. Sometimes you want to unfreeze that ice cube, redisplace that water, and then refreeze it, which is basically you want to refreeze those behaviors that are very much sticky within any organization as well. We're not going to go through all of that, but right now, today, we're just going to think about unfreezing that moment, just decoupling a lot of these different factors and just thinking about a moment in the journey that we want to identify. And so within that, we are very much disassembling that ice cube today. And within that, just know that, yes, journey maps are a great start, but customer lives in moments. They don't live in journeys. And that's a really powerful epiphany that I've shared with clients in the past, where they're like, wow, that just makes all the sense in the world as to why they're so necessary. So feel free to use that running mantra as you start to talk with your teams on this, because truly that's what's happening. Your customers are looking at influences, whether it's family member, whether that's friends, and they're thinking about that as to how in that moment they see the brand, how they see their needs, and how that takes shape. Just quickly on this, I'll take it just a bit on this. When you also talk about pivotal moments with your key leadership, you want to connect your business with your customer goals. It's really important to talk about that, because a lot of businesses, they say they're customer centric, right? And we've all heard it, right? We love the customer. We're customer centric. Yes, we are. But in the same token, we also want to map it to the business, because when we can connect that relationship to where how does the business resonate, and then how do we prioritize those moments to what the customer goals are, that's when you get into prioritization. That's where you understand what are we doing really well and what are we doing poorly. And also, what doesn't really matter because it doesn't fit our brand right now. And sometimes it's okay to kind of leave some moments by the wayside and not really define them as pivotal, or to say they're important, but we're just going to depend on other key factors to move them into that relationship. And then we're calling it out as a key impact to how people purchase or acquire our products or use them in that capacity. And it's okay to call those out as well. But when you start to have these conversations in these moments across the journey, you want to always think about what are the business goals and what are your customer goals. So these are just a couple of talking points in there, whether it's how you scale or attract qualified prospects in that moment, to how those customer goals are in that moment. And then that's how you can start to plan out whether it's a product, whether it's a social media channel or a publication of sort. Knowing that right time moment is what's key as well. So just quickly, how do we productize them? a little bit on the flip side of this, defining requirements, is a matter of understanding their decisions. And then within that, while you collectively document all that, you can have teams come together and look at collectively how they want to solve this. How is the app experience going to improve this? Cool, we're going to write derivatives of that experience into user stories or epics. How is our customer success team facilitating a lot of those support needs? Okay, in these key moments, maybe one team is indexing 60 or 7% in this moment, and the other team is 30%, but you're showing that there's a key relationship, that one team impacts the other. And so it's a beautiful way to also start to think about collectively how you can talk about the experience and move it forward as well. And so in that, I'm just going to take a beat on this. There's a lot more talking points here, but there's 3 key areas that I want to call out. And I've got the window in the way. Hold on. I've got all of you here. Okay, so it's human behavioral. And what that means, it's about understanding triggers, signals. It's about understanding routines in these moments. It's about understanding maybe shopping affinities or demographics in those moments. How are these moments more influential to one segmentation or another? These are more advanced thinking that you can apply. You don't have to get there right away, everyone. Just know this is sort of an all-encompassing discussion that you can continuously have, because these moments should be a living document. It should be something that you constantly come back to and document in your journey and in your pivotal moments as you start to build those out, which I'll share more in a moment. Business actionable, it's all about like channel dependencies. It's all about formats and attributes. It's all about like activation, that we want to drive within that moment. What is that success criteria? We have both identified that they are in this moment and our brand serves them accordingly, as well as then understanding, okay, what is the transactional factor? Maybe it's just incremental. We know that it's not like someone just decide overnight that they need to buy a new TV or they need to buy a new service from a brand. We realize that that is a buildup to that. So understanding how that contributes to the business is also something that you can think about, even down to use cases that you would drive around activation as well, including media planning, own media, all these things that you might want to connect with, including like agencies that you might be working with as well in this space. And lastly, we won't be talking about this today, but we do also want to make sure that they are brand measurable. And by that, start to think about the metrics, start to think about how these, CTAs, pre-sends, within the experience as to like how we actually funnel them, whether it's into a website, how we start to plan the metrics around that. There's a lot of things that you can do, including actually defining flow charts as to how these experiences interact with each other. Okay, we might push them to social media, and from social media, they might push to a website. What is that point of conversion that we've identified as a metric that we want to map to? These are things where you can constantly optimize these moments, because you're never going to get all of these moments right the first time. It is a constant recursive aspect where you're looking at these moments and saying, we're doing these really well, we want to index it a little bit higher. And there's other moments where we're not doing it at all, but we know we need to start thinking about them. And even if we're doing them on an incremental of like 1 or 2%, at least we're making progress. So that's a little bit of a discussion there around like thinking in that discussion. Today, for the sake of this workshop, as I pivot over to the workshop a little bit, I want you to start thinking about the human behavioral relationship. That's the first starting point. It's starting to think about our customers, thinking about where they are in the moment, and starting to ideate around them as well. So with that, I want to just, jump into the workshop. What we're going to talk about today, and I've identified, and this is kind of somewhat pulled from something that I worked on with a large university here in the U.S. and they also have programs, a couple other markets as well around the world. They really wanted to understand how to improve their funnel into having people apply for graduate school. Now, for to take it today, just to help give you a little bit more focus, I thought we would just talk about, let's say you're a potential prospective MBA grad. You want to get your MBA. That's something I'm also looking at as well. And so in that capacity, think as that emerging student, what might I be thinking about as that starts to come into play? Maybe I was passed over for a promotion. Maybe I was talking with coworkers and they were talking about something really exciting that they felt was really motivating, that would move them into thinking about getting their master's. So we want to think in that space for the scenario today. And just quickly on this, there's a couple phases that we're going to also identify. So when we talk about that, we're going to think about the awareness, which I'll show an example of that in a moment. And then from that, we're going to start to think about like researching. Okay, I'm going to go online. I'm starting to talk with friends. What did they like? What did they not like? If they, took their MBA, what are things to factor in? Am I going to third-party sites? That's all that research. That's that planning discussion. Then we'll also have another team that will allocate to the community side. What are the community things within the program that I want to explore as well? Whether I'm doing this in person and going in person, or whether I'm going online, what are the type of community factors that I want to consider that would be a right fit for me to enroll in X university, including MSU. So within that, also thinking about, say, the short list. When we're further down that area, we started to cross off some things off of our list. We want to start to think about what is the shorter list of out of maybe the 20 schools that I'm looking at. How do I get down to maybe 5 that I want to actually apply to, knowing that I'm probably going to get into one of those schools? So starting to think about all of those factors around, like, what are the criteria that I want to evaluate? What do I love about this school? What do I not, love? And then starting to make a shorter list of that. And then we've got a fourth team that'll be also identifying around the register. On the very end of that, once they've gotten in, congrats, yay, I'm so excited. Oh wait, now I got to register for school. I've got to register for classes. I'm a little overwhelmed. And we've actually seen in some of the metrics that we did with this one client, where there's actually drop off sometimes, where they'll defer, or they might not get enrolled right away. So how do we improve those anxieties by writing greater requirements, whether it might be welcome packets, whether it might be welcome materials, whether it might be, for example, a student ambassador that we can get them engaged with. These are all things that we thought about as a very broad stroke for this client. And I want you guys to think about that today as you do those breakouts. Okay, lastly, just quickly, this will just help you before we jump and dive into this and do some breakout teams. Think about this. I wanted to give you as a couple things to think about, whether it's about how do I fulfill myself? What will make me be successful? How do I see my future self? What do I see myself as successful as an MBA graduate? And having that vision is really a key factor that we want to be mindful, because we want to echo that with any potential MBA applicant to convey, how does this university fulfill that goal? We want to think about investment and cost, not so much. We didn't do too much of that pivotal moment today. That's a simple pivotal moment, but you do want to be maybe mindful that this is an investment, not a cost. It's not just about like, we're spending X amount of dollars, but it's an investment in myself, right? And so there's also things around flexibility. Will it work with my time? Can I take night classes? Fit for growth? Does it scale? And, can I defer maybe some classes for another time? Setting up reminders around that as well. When do we start to queue and have people follow up with potential interested MBA graduates? How do we text them? How do we email them? All those things that we want to consider. And lastly, around trust and transparency, we want to make those students feel safe, feel recognized, and that they have merit by joining this program at this university level. So that's just some key takeaways as you start to do a breakout. This is a quick thing, and I'm just going to have you glance at it. But this is an example how you can start to break this down into triggers and emotions, routines that influence it, whether they're talking with friends, whether they're talking with family, whether they're going online and they're doing a big search, whether they're seeing the merits of the school or talking to a professor or whatnot. All those are routines, right, that they might be doing in that moment, whether that's 2 weeks or a month, whatever that might be. And then within that point, we want to think about the rewards. I want to think about, like, what is the emotion that we're trying to solve for? Is it more confidence? Is it around fulfillment? It's around, making the decision that, yes, I'm going to start this process, or I'm going to move forward to the next step. These are things that we want to talk about as well when you're starting to ideate in this. Now, that being said, we are going to turn it over and flip it over to everybody having jumping into the mural board. Just quickly think about when you start to, if you're having any like confusion as to like how to break this down, when you're thinking about user stories, this is where we're starting to map to them. Eventually, not today, but when we get to a goal, it would be to start to map those emotions and triggers. It would be starting to map those routines and those rewards that could write user stories. We're not asking you to necessarily write user stories today, but we're asking you to organize them. So what we want to do is have you first take a moment. We've given you all Post-it notes to, with maybe some swim lanes for each one of you to break out. I think we were going to do like 3 or 4 members per team. And then we want you to also take some time out of that 15 minutes or so to also take a beat and organize, talk about it amongst yourself. So we left an area below for you to start to organize that thinking as well, because as we do the voting, we'll want you to actually sort of script out what were your findings, what did you love as a group in that discussion, because that's where we'll ask people to vote, is around that organize area as well. So with that, Alistair, do you want to take it over?
So thanks, Josh, for that great presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to break everybody out into 4 different teams based on the 4 pivotal moments that Josh outlined. So just to review, we've got our planning, our community, our shortlist, and our registration. And what you're going to do is you're going to talk about those emotional triggers and emotions. Then you're going to talk about what is that influence, what's going to cause you to move forward, and then what's the reward at the end. Ultimately, what are you going to get? And then you're going to organize that information into a linear discussion. So what I mean by that is you take those triggers and emotions, those routines of influence and their reward, and put them into one category. So we want to take those, organize them into one, so that you've got 1, 2, or 3 areas that you want to focus on. And then we will allow everybody to vote on those specific areas. And that way, Josh and I will come back. We'll discuss how we might plug and play in this journey, how all of that's going to work together. So with that, I'm going to have Tom. Tom is putting together the 4 teams. All right. Well, it looks like you all were very productive. Love to see all of the different comments and emotions and rewards, especially as we look across these 4 pivotal moments for our MBA applicants. So what I'd like to do I'm going to give Josh just a moment to look through the different information that you all provided across those pivotal moments. But at first, I'd like to, while he's doing that, I'd like to open it up to the group to see what questions folks had regarding how do we think about these pivotal moments and creating them as product, quote unquote, productized moments in our company's journey. And if there are no questions, I'm gonna start picking on people who I can see.
Well, I could, oh, should I raise my hand?
Yeah, hi, Michelle.
I'm sorry. I don't have my video on. This is
Oh,
the first time I've ever joined this group, so
oh, great.
I'm a little in the dark.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. I guess, we just kind of looked at our triggers and emotions about, what if I'm been thinking about wanting to go back to school to advance my education MBA program, how am I feeling about that? And what are going to be the things that are going to drive me
Yeah,
to want to move forward in that process and commit to it?
yeah, great. Yeah, so I would, sorry, what's your question there?
My question of putting myself in the user's shoes. I'm sorry, what am I supposed to
So
answer now?
yeah, so what
You
I'm
asked
looking
it.
for is, I totally agree, right? As someone who hasn't gone through an MBA program, um, not a huge fan of school. I'll be 100% honest. The idea of going back to do what I need to do is not super appealing to me. So Pam, what would drive you as an individual to even start to think about this, especially in the planning moment, right? So the idea here is that along your journey as an MBA applicant, you have very different stages of your mindset. And the university or college that you're applying to is trying to continue to push you to that next pivotal moment to make sure that you continue all the way through to graduation.
Sure.
Right. So I'm going to use the planning moment as one. What are the pieces, the emotional, the triggers and emotions that you would like to see that university or college go after to make sure that you move on to that next piece, which is the initial list and et cetera down the road?
So I would think that any of those triggers and emotions would be considered in tailoring engagement for any potential MBA student. And so every potential student, I mean, you're only going to reach the ones that have been considering why they want to go further and get an MBA, right? They want to do it because they want to make more money. They want to advance in their career. They want to better themselves. I mean, there's so many things, right?
Sure.
You could be considering any of those, as individual, the individual potential student. I think just all of those things, right, could be combined or could be, individual. Maybe some don't care that much whether it's going to be more money. They just want to do it for themselves. It's a dream they always had. Maybe everybody in their family has an MBA. They don't have an MBA. Maybe there's a little peer pressure around that, or everybody that they work with has one and they don't.
Yeah.
So I think that, you have to look at the pool of potential, your potential customer, could have any of these reasons and could have a combination of any of these reasons.
Yeah. No, so don't disagree. And I think, again, we're using this application process and this graduation process, if you will, as just an example, right? So if we think about our own company's customers and where they are in their journeys, and what are those moments where we know that if they don't do a thing, and if we as a company can't get them to do the next thing, that they're going to drop off, then we need to make sure that that pivotal moment is the most important piece in their journey, right? So for an MBA applicant in the planning piece, it's what is understanding of why they're there. Why are they trying to get their MBA? And Pam, to your point, maybe it's family, maybe it's their colleagues, etc. But the idea here is understanding the triggers that are going to cause our customers to move to the next point in that journey, right? And then working with the individual teams within our company to make sure that that moment is the best that it can be. And I'm focusing on planning right now, but again, we looked at 4 different moments. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh just to talk about the different moments, but I'm focusing right there. But the idea here is working in each moment with the different departments within your team. As a CX professional, our job is to work cross-functionally to make sure that our individual users or customers are getting the best experience they can have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh just to sort of continue the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Alistair. And it's exactly like where you're helping a lot of your discussion about what is happening. And perhaps one question I want to sort of note, and you all have to answer this, but perhaps when I first talked about the enrollment journey, you probably might have thought, yeah, that seems like a pretty simple experience. I go, I search, I do a bunch of Googling, and then suddenly I'm like, this is the university, and I'm enrolled, right? But when we actually took it out and we really started to dive into all of the different factors of emotions, people that I have to, interact with, whether it might be planning it with my spouse and saying, these are the night classes I need to take, and you got to pick up the kids, or, other discussions around like discussions with my boss, or even just how it relates to me. Things are, fraught with emotion, where we start to look at like, how do we need to solve for that in a way that even might be areas of like providing recommendations on like how to deal with stress, how to deal, with course loads, getting more of that content, because in this particular case with a client that we worked with, we identified a lot of moments that they hadn't even explored. It was suddenly an eye-opener to say, it's not just about what our university does and the accreditations and the strengths and getting the amplification of like people and students saying, I loved it here, but actually connecting it with, walking people through that experience and doing a little bit more hand-holding. And they realize that they need to do like a 3 or 4 year plan on their content to really reach people on another level, knowing that all of these emotions, all these influences are contributing to those decisions. And even as we found out through them that they had even when they accepted students, that a lot of those students would either defer or wouldn't even enroll in classes. Again, there was that anxiety. Am I good enough? Will I be able to complete these classes? So when you think about these moments, that's when you can start to think about, okay, what do we need to plan for? Whether it's the social media, whether it's paid, whether it's organic, whether it's like partnering up with other sites that might be, providing more of this intelligence, for example, like US News and World Report or whatnot. All those things that we want to start to think about would be applicable in a way that will move the needle for greater application success. And that's our goal, right? That's our goal as any business in this particular case. But really, we also know that there are a lot of barriers. And so calling those out, identifying those and starting to write requirements is what's key. I know we're at time, so we'll leave this up for others to look at as well. The idea here, team, is that you can start to connect a lot of these different relationships and start to write requirements off of that. I wanted to just quickly share and go back to my presentation for a second, because I wanted to show an example that indeed this can be rather successful as well as you start to craft those goals. And within that space, again, mapping the business and the customer outcomes. This is an example of some work. Can you all see my screen here? I'm zooming in. So what we were able to do is do a great deal of media planning. We started to identify their website in terms of the different types of phases that a person would move through the website. What you're seeing here is even where once we identified 15 different moments, we identified what they were doing very successful in, and we're kind of patting each other on the back and saying, look, we're actually doing this really well. Like you want to reinforce with your teams that we're doing this very well, and so that we can do more of these in other areas where they also, in this particular capacity, we found out they weren't doing them so well, whether it was financial planning, whether it was other areas where they were trying to get student ambassadors to engage with them, or getting professors to have not so much one-on-ones, but maybe group sessions where they can ask questions. They started to organize a lot of thought. And what you're seeing here is even in that center, we started to even map out what is the success of these channels. How do we get maybe a social media or an email that we push to them? How do we get better planning so that we want to push them to either this page or that page, or we want them to push them to a call center because they had a call center where you could actually call and ask questions. All those things, we could start to add metrics of what that success looked like. And then if they fell off, when do we re-engage them? When do we send them more emails? And when do we also identify that they're interested, but they just can't do it right now? And we're not going to overwhelm them with a bunch of emails where they're going to unsubscribe, but we're going to give them opportunity to say, I'm very interested, but I need to do this for the spring or the fall or whatever that is. So all these things started to come into place where it just was a huge reveal, where they were able to start to get a roadmap and a planning effort for the next 3 to 5 years. So it is very doable. Just know that, and you just need to start small. One thing I will leave everybody as you may need to drop, know that you can also prioritize these things. You don't have to do all these moments at once. Once you've started to craft them, start to think what can we bite off right now and start to chew on it? What can we, and then what is maybe something that's a 3 or 4 year plan, and that's okay too. We at least have a backlog, and we have to get engineering involved. We might have to get a platform reset up because it's not working the way we want it. All those things can be evaluated as well. It should be something that shouldn't bring people anxiety. It should be awareness. It should bring a context of what's doable now and what's doable later. So hopefully that's a sense of inspiration to all.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it. And I know Josh is gonna, we're gonna share out the deck. For those of you who
Yes.
asked, I know someone asked about whether we're gonna share it. We are. And we'll share out the video. But before everyone drops, I know we only have about 15 of you. But Tom, can you please go ahead and share what we're gonna talk about next month with our
Yeah.
buddy Z?
Yeah, we're really excited to have Nicholas Z. Zeisler, who is also a member of our faculty in the MS CXM program, to talk about why do you ask, a focus on voice of the customer. Really looking forward to that. Those of you that don't know Z, he's a really dynamic speaker, really engaging, fun guy, great sense of humor too. So I'm sure you'll enjoy your time with Z. So with that, you guys have a great month. Thanks again for joining us this month. If you're in Michigan, try to stay warm.
And in Massachusetts, because it's still cold here.
Or Chicago.
Or Chicago. It's
Thank
been
you all.
snowing and great gray outside. All right, guys, take
All
care.
right, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.